And Assalamu alaikum. This is Rehana, the author of the Tea Trolley. And before I begin, I would like to thank Liberty Books for giving me this opportunity to talk about the book. And I want to thank everybody who is listening and who has taken the time out to be here. Thank you very much. I'm honored and grateful. So whenever I talk about a book, whether it's something that I've written or something that somebody else has written, I like to know about the author. So in this case, of course, it's me. So I have lived in Karachi all my life. I'm an absolutely die-hard Karachiite. I went to St. Joseph's School and St. Joseph's College. And however, once I got married, I was outside of the country for 30 years. And I lived in Turkey and Italy and Nigeria, and Indonesia and Kenya and the United States. And before I left Pakistan, I had already started writing in newspapers and magazines in Karachi. And then wherever I went, in whichever country I was, I wrote for English language publications there as well. I did not write much. I did not write a great deal. I'm not a prolific writer for newspapers and magazines at all, perhaps 2 or 3 articles a year. But I'm an avid reader. And reading is something that is a part of my life and has been a part of my life since childhood. So I read a great deal. And for me, it is as important as eating and sleeping. And I have found that people who like to read, especially people who like to read fiction, like stories. And I do like stories. I like to listen to stories. I like to read stories. I like to be told stories. I like to tell stories. And of course, the 2 victims who were main victims of my storytelling who were my children. And what would happen would be that I would tell them a story and they would listen. But after a while, they just started feeling it was too much. And I would have to just open my mouth to tell them about an anecdote or an incident that might have happened. And they would just say, no, Ammi, you've told us this one before. We've heard this one. Or they would tell me that they had to do homework. And as they grew older, they started telling me, listen, don't tell us stories. Write down the stories. Sit down and write a novel. If you have so many stories in your mind, why don't you write them down? And so finally, at their insistence, I went and I sat in front of my computer. Now, when that is the easy part. So you go and you sit in front of the computer and you know how to type. That's the easy part. But what do you write about? And so I decided after a bit of thought that I must write about the 2 things that I know most about. And those 2 things are, one is Karachi, the city that I've always lived in, at least mostly. And the second is marriage. Now, I'm not an absolute expert on marriage because I've only been married once. So I can't say that I know everything about it, but I certainly know more about marriage than I would say about working in an office, which I have never done. So I chose to write about marriage. And the other reason is that it is such a universal subject. I had found that in Pakistan, of course, marriage and weddings are the topic. I mean, I don't think anybody in the world spends as much money, time, and effort on marriages and weddings as we do in Pakistan. And it's across the board in all ethnicities. And when we meet somebody, we want to know whether she's married. And if she's married, that's good, but is she happily married? And if she's not happily married, whose fault is it? And if she's not married, why isn't she married? And especially if it's a man and he's not married, we must immediately run out and find some nice girl for him. Otherwise, of course, we haven't done our duty. But the funny thing is, people, that it's not only in Pakistan that marriage is and relationships are so important. I found that in every country we lived, whether it was in Africa or Europe or Asia or America, people really cared about relationships and marriages. And they needed shoulders to cry on when things were not working out. They needed to ask you ways of, I mean, I remember this Moroccan diplomat who asked me, how does one find a nice person to get married to? And I mean, she seemed to be so successful. And then she still is looking for this. But that is the way it is, because the one biggest ingredient of happiness in anybody's life is a happy marriage. And so I thought marriage would be a good subject to write about. And then it is a limitless subject because, of course, there are many ways of being happily married. But being unhappily married is of infinite variety. Unhappy marriages can be of every sort. And even though we have reached the moon as human beings, we have reached the moon, and we might even find a cure for cancer one day, I don't think we will find an absolute foolproof method of having a happy marriage. So, marriage. The other part the other topic, of course, that I'm writing about is Karachi. And the Karachi I'm writing about is in 1979. And 1979 was just before Russia invaded Afghanistan. So it was a simpler, more innocent time in Karachi. It was a much smaller city. The main bazaar was still Bori Bazaar, and people used to come from far and wide to buy whatever they needed there. It was a safe city. There were guards outside banks, but these guards would be just carrying their uh, double-barreled rusted gun slung over their shoulder, but they would basically be telling people be serving tea to the people in the office. So things were really safe. And then, I mean, this will sound like a fairy tale, but in those days, teenagers used to actually listen to their parents, and they did what they were told. They got married to who they want. Their parents decided that they should get married to, and they even did careers that their parents chose for them. And there was this innate feeling that if their parents wanted a certain thing for them, it would be for their own good. It was a simpler time, as I'm saying. And then there was segregation. There were boys' schools, and then there were girls' schools. There were boys' colleges, and there were girls' colleges. But co-education was really basically found only either in universities or professional colleges. Otherwise, the sexes didn't really meet. And that was another reason why when parents said, why don't you get married to this person? The son or daughter just agreed because they didn't really know any better. So this was a really simpler time and a small city. So now we come to the novel itself, The Tea Trolley. So what is it about? The Tea Trolley is a fictional novel. Obviously, all novels are fiction. It has two strands. One strand is the story of Amna, a young 18-year-old whose parents are looking around for a good match for her. And so she's going through that entire arranged marriage situation where people are coming to see her. In some cases, her parents don't like who comes. And in some cases, she's rejected by the people who come. And there's this whole situation going on. And the other strand is made up of stories told to Amna by her family and friends. And all these stories are about marriage. Each story is complete in itself, and each story is talking about one aspect of marriage. And the reason why they're telling Amna these stories is because they want her to get acquainted with what she might have to face in the real world when she gets married. So each story is complete in itself, and it's like a string of Amna's life with 12 pearls hanging on it, and each pearl is a story. Though at that point, it was 32 years since, in 1979, it was 32 years since Pakistan had come into existence, and that's a really young country. But we had already gone through two traumatic events: 1947 partition, and then the separation of East Pakistan and the creation of Bangladesh. And what I've also shown in the book is how the vulnerable sections of society, the women and the children, are always the ones who are adversely affected when some cataclysmic event happens. And I'm not talking about terrible things like death and destruction and rape, but I mean even minor things. When the norm is disturbed, when the things do not go on happening as they have always happened, then the weaker parts of society, the women and children, suffer. And they have to bear the brunt. So, if you remember many years ago, there used to be a famine in Ethiopia, and we all saw these pictures of absolute stick thin Ethiopian women with children clinging to their legs. We never saw pictures of stick thin Ethiopian men. There must have been some, but many might have actually escaped from Ethiopia for better pastures. But women and children have a harder time to escape. So I have made it a point to talk about how things affect women and children when they don't go right. Okay, so a question that's always asked is this an autobiography? It's not an autobiography at all. It's totally fictional. It is written in the first person, but that is just a technique of writing. I mean, many books are written in the first person, in the second, and the third, whichever way the author finds it easy to write. That's just a ploy. That does not mean that the story is about me at all. It's just entirely fiction. Um, the other question that comes up is, are the stories true? The 12 stories that are in the book. And the short answer is no, they're not true. But the longer answer is, well, there might be some parts of them that are true because obviously the writer writes about her experience in life. Not her actual experience, but her general experience. So, to give you an example, I met a lady once, in real life, I mean. I met her and she's told me that the relationship between her husband and herself was that of India and Pakistan. Well, that remained in my mind. And when I was writing the story of the two sisters in the book, I used that line there. But the rest, the entire story about the two sisters is a figment of my imagination. But this little bit is true because somebody actually told me that. So it's like taking a little niboli and sowing it, and the niboli is the truth, and then a huge big neem tree grows out of it, and the whole neem tree is fiction that I have made out of it. So that's how it is, basically. Then we come to reactions. What are the reactions about this book? Well, the way things are in Pakistan, nobody has walked up to me and told me they hated the book, thank God. Because, that would be very rude and horrible, and that would not be the way people behave here. So, at least to my face, everybody liked it. But I have also received some feedback in a different way, and I'll tell you about that. I got a call once from a lady who told me that she was very dark in complexion, and she said that she really identified with the woman in my book who was dark in complexion, and because of that, she was getting no proposals. And people would come to see her and then would just decide that she's not good enough and walk away, and it was soul destroying for her. Then at another time, I met this young man who was good looking, young, successful. And he said that at one point when he was a teenager, he had an uncle and cousins who lived in Chicago. And whenever they came to Pakistan, they treated him like a provincial nobody. And he said, I just felt awful. And then when he read the book and he read the story of the slighted sister, he said that was exactly how he had felt. And the story of the slighted sister is of a sister who lives in the village and her brother lives in Lahore. And whenever the brother comes, she is made to feel extremely pendu and sort of no account. So when I get these sort of feedbacks from people where they say that their lives they had found parallels in my book to their own life, then I feel very good. But on the other hand, there is this very well-known gentleman who walked up to me one day and said, who have you written this novel for? The madrasa? And I said, oh, why would you say that? And he said, because there's not a bad word in it and nothing horrible happens. What sort of a novel is it? And I said to him, listen, it is about 1979 when things were simpler and nicer. And it's about people like me, and perhaps people like me were nicer too. And so we didn't use bad words and did horrible things. But that's what it is. So those are the reactions. And I would like you to remember when you read the book, or if you've read the book, that it is not a book about sociology or anthropology or history. It is fiction. It is just made up stories. And it is a slice of life of Pakistan of a certain time, 1979, of a certain place, Karachi, and of a certain type of people, sort of the middle class or the upper middle class. So it's only a slice of Pakistani life, thoroughly and completely fictionalized. So this is about my book. What I would like to do, since I can see that I still have a little bit of time, is to read out a little from the book itself so that you have an idea of what it sounds like. So, the first part that I would like to read is about Amna getting ready for the very first lot of people who are coming to see her. Nobody has come to see her before that. This is the first time. And it's sort of new for her and the family. And so everybody is getting together about what she should wear and what she should look like and all that sort of thing. So here goes. And please remember that it is in the first person. So the person who's speaking is Amna, and the people who are coming to see her is a doctor and his parents. I finally got dressed to everybody's satisfaction. But as it happened, my looks did not matter. My mother disliked the doctor on sight. He was wearing socks with sandals. At age 27, if he doesn't even know how to dress, my mother said, there is no hope for him. My father declared that the young man was sound, and to disapprove of him, based simply on a lack of fashion sense, was foolhardy. But my mother was adamant. If he can't get dressed properly for such an important occasion, I don't think his priorities are correct, she said. Besides, I have to base my decision on what I see, and what I saw I didn't like. She was willing to concede that his parents seemed okay, but that was as far as she went. Why should my daughter marry someone she would have to coach and train? Was her answer to my father's suggestion that I could help the doctor dress better. This discussion took place after the doctor and his family had departed, and we had started to devour all the sweets and savories made for them. I was not asked for my view of the matter at all. It was a concession on the part of my parents to allow me to be present as they hashed over every move and word of the doctor and his parents. The fact that his mother ate the cake with a spoon and not a fork was brought up. The 1 hour visit of the 3 guests was all that the decision about my life could be based upon. So no detail was trivial. My mother prevailed, and the doctor was scratched off the list of hopefuls. So that's the very first experience that she had of being seen, as it's said, as we say in Pakistan. And here is another experience of the same sort where somebody else is coming to see her. And this is, I entered the drawing room behind the tea trolley. The guy this time was a banker working for a foreign bank in Karachi. He was personable enough and had the social grace to initiate a conversation with me. I gave all the correct replies as I looked around the room. His parents were there, and they looked to be normal and middle-aged, nothing to dislike there. I served tea to them, and the mother engaged me in a brief conversation. All went according to schedule, and the guests left about 45 minutes after their arrival. On Saturday, the banker's family called my mother. They had rejected me because, according to the mother of the banker, my mouth was too large. Too large? Was there a regulation mouth size that I had violated? I felt insulted and also blazingly angry. It wasn't as if they were the most beautiful people in the world themselves. How trivial-minded could you get? So that's all from my side. And I think we are open to question and answers. And I hope people will have some questions and I hope I'll be able to answer them. Amama Jalil says that she's currently reading the Tea Trolley. I'm so pleased. Thank you, Amama. I hope you like it. Oh, and here is Aniba Cookie. And she says that she's very happy to meet me. Well, you have met me to some extent, Aniba, but I've really not met you because I don't know anything apart from your name. But I wish you very well and you have a great life, inshallah. And then we have Arusa Siddiqui, and she says that it is best hobby that she has reading, and she reads a lot. Arusa, may I just take just a second to tell you something? You know, I told you earlier on that I lived in many countries, and even though it sounds very romantic to say that I lived in this country and that country, but what happens is that when you get to a new country, you know no one, you don't know the ways, you don't know the ways of the country, you don't even know the roads and the routes to any place, you don't even know where to get your meat from, and really it's everything is difficult, and having no friends is the worst. And so when I, because of my habit of reading, those first few weeks or months always passed well, because even though I didn't know so many people, but I was so involved and immersed in my reading that being in a new country didn't bother me. So please keep on reading. I think that's a great, great hobby. Good for you, Arusa. Noman Nizamani, pleased to. Oh, are you pleased to hear me? I'm so glad, Noman, that you are there. Yes, nice to talk to you. Oh, and Arusa says that she liked the idea of me writing about Karachi and about marriages. Is that what you mean by the topic? Yes, yes. I mean, really, basically, you have to write about what you know about. Otherwise, of course, you can do a lot of research about things and you can write about that. But basically you have to know about, I mean, even though I may know nothing about how the Japanese culture looks at marriage, but at least I can go and find that out. And then I would have something to relate it to, because I know how marriages and things work in Pakistan. So then I would be able to relate the two. But if I knew nothing at all, I mean, for example, I could not write about how atomic bombs are made. That would be very difficult for me, because for one thing, I think they shouldn't even be made. Oh, Aniva, good. Please go and get the book, and I hope you really and truly like it. Yes, good girl. Tuba, environmental influences. Oh, yeah, environmental influences are there. Very much so. Very, very much so. I mean, look at us. I'm speaking in English. You're writing in English. If that's not an environmental influence, I don't know what it can be. I mean, we are English is certainly neither my mother tongue nor your mother tongue, Tuba, but this has become the lingua franca, and so now we find it's so easy to talk up in it, to think in it, to read in it, to write in it, and it's all because of our colonial heritage and the environment that it had created. When is my next book coming? Well, my next book should be coming shortly, but if I might take a 1 minute to tell you a little anecdote, and please don't be like my children and say you've heard this anecdote before. No, you haven't heard this one before. It's a bit like Lewis Carroll, you know, the writer of Alice in Wonderland. He wrote Alice in Wonderland, and Queen Victoria was the queen in those days, and she read the book and she fell in love with the book, and she wrote a little note to Professor Dodgson, which was his real name, and he used to teach mathematics in Cambridge and or Oxford, I can't remember which, and but one of the two. And she wrote a little note to say, uh, "Please send me your next book when it comes out." So, of course, being the queen, the minute he wrote his next book, the book was sent to her, and she was absolutely shocked because it was a treatise on mathematics. So, no, I'm not writing a treatise on mathematics, but it is a translation of an Urdu book. So it is of an Urdu diary, actually. So it is totally different from this. It is not my own. It is a translation, and it is a diary. So yes, it should be coming before the end of the year, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah. How long does it take you to write a book? Not long. I mean, my life is not just writing a book. I'm obviously a housewife, and my other big passion, apart from reading, is doing volunteer work. So I'm really, really involved with doing a lot of volunteer work in underprivileged areas, and that takes up a lot of my time. But I would say that the tea trolley took me about a year. About a year, it took me about a year. But that was with everything else going on as well. The basic thing, Imad, is once you have it all clear in your mind about what you want to write, then it's easy to, I mean, it's not easy, but once you know what you want to write about, then it's only the mechanics. Farida. Oh, I'm so glad you are here, Farida. Farida is a very talented lady, married to a very talented gentleman, and I'm so glad that she's here because I hope that she will read the book, and I hope, Farida, that you will like it because your comments and your feedback will be very, very special to me. Thank you. What is my source of inspiration? Truly, storytelling. That is my source of inspiration. Storytelling is it. I don't know whether you are aware, Imad, but I've also written two um, books for children. Those books are in Urdu. So I've written two Urdu story books for children. And really, that is my inspiration always, that I want to tell a good story. That is what it is. And read a good story and be told a good story. Of course, I'd love to sign it for you or for anybody else. Yeah, absolutely. I, whenever we had these sort of meetings in person, then of course I was right there. But because of COVID, now it has to be all planned ahead. Thank you, Aniba. Shiza. Oh, you read it a few months ago, Shiza. Oh, that is so sweet of you. That is so sweet of you, Shiza. And I'll tell you, actually, I got an email from a young woman who read the book, and she said to me that nobody in her family ever talked about Bangladesh, the creation of Bangladesh. That was like a taboo subject. And she said that this was one of the few books in which I had touched upon this point at all. So you're right, Shiza, that there. I'm so glad. I wish that that gentleman who told me that the book was for the madrasa would read your comment. I love your comment, Shiza. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, one of the things that people ask me is whether I suggest that it's a good idea to get married in the arranged way, or do I think it's a better idea to just go find your own spouse? Well, I really don't have much of an opinion in that because I do not want to tread on anybody's toes. But certainly my own children would not get married to anybody I would want them to. And they did not. And I was very happy that they found their own spouses and they got married. I mean, at least my daughter did. And I'm so happy that she found her own young man. She came to me. She said, "This is the person I like. Have a look, check him out." I did. He was just wonderful. They got married and they're happily married still after 25 years. Allah ka shukr. So that's my view. But whatever your parents' view, that's good too. Okay, I think we're really coming down to the last few seconds, and I would just like to thank everybody who's been so kind, and Liberty Books again, and Lalaine, who has set this whole thing up, even though I'm so bad at technology. I'm at home, and I don't know whether she's at home or at Liberty Books, but she has set it all up. And Muniba, who had talked to me earlier, thank you very much, Muniba, Lalaine, and especially Liberty Books. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Lalaine. It was very nice. You did it so beautifully. Thank you very much.